Modern medication did not work for me. Modern medication did not work for me. Modern medication did not work for me. Modern medication.
Okay, man. Thing that folks are most curious about is what's happening here in local, locally. Let's hop over to our news section and try and see if we can find some information on the latest on cities banning dispensaries. We know several cities have been putting forth local bans on uh, facilities of all kinds, actually, in their respective vicinities. clicking on our news tab, and then browsing, if you want, to our news feeds section, you'll see titles. Ashland might change medical marijuana code. Kevin Sabet was here in Oregon. Bandon should stop student drug tests. And former DEA agent joins pot investors. So those stories can be seen at our website. And more. Just visit it, folks. mercycenters.org. Indian giver.
I looked you a little bit.
So, cannabis for bipolar. What could possibly cause a mother to give a bong filled with marijuana to her 10-year-old daughter? Simply put, to save the lives of all her children. Cannabis has been proven to be an effective treatment for many physical and psychological conditions, including bipolar disorder. This is not a fact or a rumor taken from the internet, nor not an assumption based on something that was heard once upon a time. Rather, this information is drawn from a very personal source. My mother started treating my bipolar disorder when I was 10 after I tried to stab my brother and ended up taking his bedroom door completely off the hinges. She was an original hippie who knew, understood, and appreciated the benefits of medical cannabis more than 30 years ago. My mother told me I needed to learn how to hit the bong and calm down, or she would call the cops and have me arrested. This was my reality and the beginning of my appreciation and respect for cannabis. Bipolar disorder can be a particularly difficult disease to deal with, as the symptoms can range from the extreme highs of mania, to the deepest depression and suicidal and/or homicidal thoughts and actions. Often, hallucinations and delusions are present, which causes the patient to lose complete contact with reality. Anger and violence have often accompanied most of my depressive phases. Thankfully, my mother understood that this is a disease and the symptoms would respond to cannabis. Using cannabis has been extremely effective in treating all aspects of my bipolar disorder. It alleviates the depression, the dark hole one crawls into and cannot seem to escape, without thoughts of suicidal and homicidal ideation. Cannabis also calms the racing mind and helps to control the impulsivity, while allowing the patient to relate to others without the grandiose thinking that often accompanies bipolar disorder. I have never been quiet or even that discreet about using marijuana. While working for a local police department, it was a well-known fact among staff and officers. It was the only way many of us could function in the stress-filled environment of an emergency 911 center, and I was not the only one who medicated in order to work at that job. There are admittedly a few things wrong with using cannabis to treat my disorder. I currently reside in a non-legal state. Therefore, the fact that I and my family could be charged with a state or federal crime and incarcerated for choosing an all-natural healing herb is the most disturbing and my reason for advocating for cannabis legalization throughout Utah. Physically obtaining cannabis has never been much of an issue, even in Utah. However, being able to afford it can be. By allowing a patient to grow their own choice of herbal medicine, the affordability of treatment is greatly reduced. When unable to afford or access cannabis, I tend to decompensate quickly and usually end up being forcibly admitted to lockdown psychiatric facilities where numerous pharmaceuticals are pumped into my system, oftentimes without my full consent or even knowledge. I eventually wind up having to undergo electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, as a last-ditch effort. The ECT usually consists of at least 10 to 20 treatments, which requires a general anesthetic. After the administration of the anesthetic intravenously, the treating physician then places 1 or 2 electrodes on the head. The location depends on the exact type of ECT and administers a shock of electricity in order to produce a seizure. Images of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest come to mind when discussing shock therapy, which are usually disavowed by hospital staff. However, common side effects of ECT include severe headaches and nausea, loss of bladder control, muscle aches and spasms, and debilitating memory loss and the inability to concentrate or focus. Prior to undergoing ECT, I was a highly functioning individual with the assistance of cannabis. I was a college graduate, raising a daughter, working in highly stressful environments. After starting ECT, I lost my job with the state of Utah, was found to be permanently disabled, and have not been able to work at my substantial level since, despite numerous attempts. My specific side effects have included immense memory loss, both short and long term, and the inability to concentrate. I've lost the ability to read and write, and was trying to read from right to left, and I misinterpreted almost every word. I also experienced serious word finding problems and developed a type of signaling or signing for my daughter to understand. Teaching myself to read and write again was one of the hardest things I've ever managed in my life. After more than 5 years of undergoing fairly consistent ECT treatments, I continue to struggle with the very basic elements of communications. The cost of hospitalizations and ECT treatments, both in and outpatient, are astronomical. Being hospitalized every 3 to 6 months for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, with corresponding outpatient ECT treatments, can cost upwards of to $60,000 each time, some of which is covered by Medicare. The rest is usually written off as I am on disability, unable to afford it. It makes much more sense to allow patients to be able to obtain cannabis legally through a dispensary, or, better yet, to grow it for their own personal use. Legal or not, cannabis will continue to be my treatment of choice. I was initially prescribed pharmaceuticals at the age of 15 and have tried basically every psychotropic medication available, including lithium, Lamictal, Depakote, Risperdal, Seroquel, and Safras. The side effects of these medications include severe sedation, dry mouth, loss of creativity, and nausea, and the prohibitive cost keeps many patients with bipolar disorder from maintaining their prescriptions. None of these prescribed medications have provided the type of relief that cannabis does. Personal experience has consistently proven that I am able to think much more clearly and actually function with the assistance of cannabis. It allows me to be a calmer, patient, and more understanding mother, and has been a terrific aid in raising a wonderful daughter. Different symptoms of bipolar disorder can be treated with different strains of cannabis. Sativa strains produce a more euphoric type of high, improving mood and relieving stress, while indica strains help to relax muscles, work as a general anesthetic, and help with sleep. I will continue to choose cannabis over prescription medications or ECT every time. By sharing this story, I hope to encourage other patients and families who are trying to live with bipolar disorder to consider utilizing cannabis as an all-natural herbal remedy to control their symptoms, legal or not. Also, American Herbal Pharmacopoeia announces finalization of historic cannabis monograph. The AHP announced the finalization of a long-awaited and much-anticipated monograph on cannabis, otherwise known as marijuana. Like all AHP monographs, the publication provides standards of identity, purity, analysis, and quality, as well as information on the cultivation and storage of the botanical and its preparations. According to AHP President Roy Upton, cannabis is used medicinally pretty much throughout the entire timeline of written history, and from archaeological evidence far beyond into antiquity. Virtually every culture who had access to it, either from local flora or trade, which was widespread, used it medicinally and recreationally. The idea of developing an AHP monograph for cannabis came from medical director Aviva Rome, MD, who reported that patients, first in her medical residency at Yale and then at Tufts, benefited from cannabis when other medications failed. This is followed by the recognition by 20 states of the medical utility of the botanical through passage of medical marijuana laws. Soon after, Americans for Safe Access, or ASA, a Washington, D.C. based advocacy organization for the medical use of cannabis, expressed the need for such standards. According to Upton, the monograph is historic in that it is the first formal pharmacopoeial monograph on cannabis developed in the U.S. in more than 70 years. The first monograph was introduced in the United States pharmacopoeia in 1850 and was removed from the 12th edition in 1942. Considering the widespread use of cannabis, it is important for there to be quality control guidance whether used for medicinal or non-medicinal purposes. According to Steph Scheer, Executive Director of ASA, the AHP monograph creates much-needed quality assurance standards for the states that have medical access laws. The adoption of these standards will create confidence in the quality and reliability of cannabis therapies for their patients and their physicians. The various bodies of information contained in the monograph include standards for identification, quality, purity, cultivation and processing, guidance, constituent profile, and a variety of analytical methodologies for the identification of the plant as well as quantitation of specific cannabinoids. Much of this information was developed in collaboration with numerous researchers at the University of Mississippi under the guidance of Dr. Mahmoud El-Soleh, professor of pharmaceutics and one of the country's foremost cannabis experts. UMISS is the only federally legal source of medical marijuana in the U.S., and they have been analyzing their own cultivated material as well as products seized by the Drug Enforcement Administration for more than 30 years. They are among the most expert in the world of all things cannabis. The information provided in the monograph will be of value to a wide range of those involved in the medical use of cannabis, including growers, caregivers, patients, practitioners, analytical labs, state regulators, and researchers. This pharmacopoeial monograph will be followed by a therapeutic addendum, which will represent a comprehensive review of the world's historical and scientific data on the use of the plant.
Was that the Super Bowl and Mark Rippey was Mark Rippey?
To order the AHP Cannabis Monograph, go to www.herbal-ahp.org. For more information, you can also contact the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia at that same website address. So there you go, Cannabis Law Reform fans. Those two little tidbits on cannabis for bipolar disorder, as well as the mainstreaming of medical cannabis there with its addition back into the standard United States pharmacopoeia is happening. So, folks may or may not have heard about President Obama acknowledging cannabis to be less harmful than booze. He says, quote, "We should not be locking up kids or individual users for long stretches of jail time." And we'll see how many of those actually happened during his tenure when he was president. See if he sets a new record. And we know that he's busted more medical cannabis facilities than the Bush League did, and they were setting a new record for that. Washington, D.C. Consuming cannabis is less harmful to the individual than is drinking alcohol. President Barack Obama acknowledged this week in an interview with The New Yorker. Responding to questions regarding the public's growing support in favor of legalizing the plant, the president stated, "As has been well documented, I smoked pot as a kid, and I view it as a bad habit and a vice. I don't think it is more dangerous than alcohol." When asked whether he believes cannabis to be less of a threat to the public health than booze, the president replied affirmatively, stating that the plant poses fewer harms in terms of its impact on the individual consumer. However, he added, "It is not something I encourage. I think it's a bad idea, a waste of time, not very healthy." According to a 2009 review published in the British Columbia Mental Health and Addictions Journal, the health-related costs per user are 8 times higher for drinkers of alcoholic beverage than they are for those who use cannabis. and are more than 40 times higher for tobacco smokers. The president also acknowledged that African Americans and Latinos comprise a disproportionate number of marijuana arrests compared to Caucasians, despite engaging in similar rates of cannabis consumption.
We were.
Middle-class kids don't get locked up for smoking pot, and poor kids do, he said. And African American kids and Latino kids are more likely to be poor and less likely to have the resources and the support to avoid unduly harsh penalties. According to a June 2003 ACLU study, African Americans nationwide are approximately 4 times as likely as whites to be arrested for marijuana possession. Finally, the president acknowledged the significance of recently imposed changes in Colorado and Washington state laws allowing for the regulation of cannabis. Though he described the ongoing implementation of the new laws as a challenge, he added, "It's important for these states' reforms to go forward because it's important for society not to have a situation in which a large portion of people have at one time or another broken the law and only a select few get punished. We should not be locking up kids or individual users for long stretches of jail time." In September, Deputy Attorney General James Cole testified to the members of the United States Senate that the Obama administration will not seek to preempt state ballot initiatives regulating the plant's production and retail sale, unless such activities specifically undermine 8 explicit federal law enforcement priorities. Normal Deputy Director Paul Armentano suggests that this new position by the president is significant. He said, "While it is ultimately the responsibility of Congress to address America's long-standing and failed drug policies, the president can use the bully pulpit to set the tone and move the conversation in the proper direction. Until recently, he has largely failed to do so, but in his recent public statements regarding the relative safety of cannabis compared to alcohol, and his acknowledgement that criminalization disproportionately impacts minorities and the poor, may indicate that the president and his party are finally willing to utilize their public platform and political capital to fight for actual changes in new law, rather than simply acknowledge changes in attitude. Under federal law, marijuana is presently classified to be equally as dangerous as heroin. Well, let's hope that those big words lead to actual change. Yeehaw! Georgia! The majority of voters support legalizing marijuana. The majority of Georgia voters believe that the adult use of marijuana, or cannabis, should be legal and regulated according to findings of a statewide public policy poll survey commissioned by the Georgia NORML and Peachtree NORML. 54% of respondents endorsed changing Georgia law to regulate and tax marijuana similarly to alcohol. 41% respondents opposed the idea. The totals are similar to nationwide percentages reported earlier this month by CNN, which found that 55% of Americans favor making cannabis legal for adults. 57% of those Georgians surveyed supported making cannabis legal for medical purposes only, while 33% opposed doing so. By a margin of nearly 2-to-1, respondents supported decriminalizing marijuana possession offenses. 62% of voters supported amending state law to make the offense a civil violation, punishable by a fine up to $100 but without jail time. Over a dozen states impose similar fine-only sanctions for minor cannabis possession offenses. 32% of voters endorsed maintaining existing criminal penalties. Only 32%. Under present law, marijuana possession is classified as a criminal misdemeanor, punishable by up to 1 year of incarceration and a $1,000 fine. In 2010, an estimated 32,500 Georgians were arrested for violating marijuana laws, according to the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigations. The total is the 6th highest of any state in America. The citizens of Georgia agree. Marijuana prohibition is a wasteful and destructive policy, said Peachtree NORML's Executive Director Sharon Ravert. It is time for our state to catch up with public opinion and find a more sensible solution to the status quo. Nearly 800 Georgia voters participated in the poll, which possesses a margin of error of plus or minus 3.5%. By the way, y'all. So let's hope that they can make some progress with those findings there in Georgia. Out of Haifa, Israel, study. Student drug testing programs are ineffective. The imposition of student drug testing programs is not effective in limiting students' consumption of controlled substances, according to survey data published in the January edition of the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs. Investigators from Israel and the United States assessed whether students' awareness of drug testing programs in their school was associated with a reduction in the frequency of their use of alcohol, cigarettes, or cannabis. Consistent with previous research, results of the current study show that perceived SDT, or student drug testing, is not associated with a reduction in initiation or escalation of substance abuse in the general student population. Previous assessments of the SDT programs, including random testing programs, report that the imposition of such programs are not associated with reduced levels of student drug use and, in some cases, are associated with an increased use of illicit drugs other than marijuana, which flush out of the system much more quickly, which won't attach themselves to your fatty portions of your body, and be detectable for as much as up to a month if you're a chronic user. So history keeps repeating itself on this issue, and we only hope that common sense comes to rule and we quit wasting not just money, but people. You know, lives are ruined on this nonsensical thing, and it's rife with mistakes and errors and inaccuracies and fallacies. So more states need to do like New Hampshire, where House members vote in a favor of measure to legalize and regulate marijuana.
You know what I've been talking about you lately?
Members of the New Hampshire House of Representatives on Wednesday, that would be January 15th, 2014, voted 170 to 162 in favor of legalization, represented by House Bill 492, which was to legalize the personal use and or cultivation of marijuana by persons 21 years of age or older, and to establish regulations for the retail production and sale of cannabis. The vote marks the first time that a state legislative chamber has ever voted in favor of legislation to legalize and regulate marijuana for adults. Said Normal Communications Director Eric Altieri, 58% of Americans support ending the prohibition of marijuana, and the New Hampshire House lawmakers' actions signal that politicians are beginning to acknowledge the will of their constituents. House lawmakers last year rejected a similar measure by a vote of 239 to 112. Members of the House Ways and Means Committee will now further debate the measure's potential financial implications. The full House is anticipated to vote once again on the measure in the upcoming months. Democrat Governor Maggie Hassan has stated publicly that she opposes the measure and that she would veto it if it reached her desk. So, folks need to de-elect that person and make sure she's not there messing with the will of the people. And obviously special interest serving person there. Because that's, you know, folks like this completely ignore news like this here. Non-psychoactive cannabinoid protects against alcohol-induced liver damage. This report out of Guangdong, China. The administration of the non-psychotropic cannabinoid, cannabidiol, or CBD, protects the liver from damage caused by alcohol consumption, according to preclinical data published online in the journal Free Radical Biology and Medicine. Investigators from China and the US assessed whether cannabidiol administration can protect against alcohol-induced steatosis or excessive fat buildup in the liver. They reported that cannabidiol protects mouse liver from acute alcohol-induced steatosis through multiple mechanisms, including the attenuation of alcohol-mediated oxidative stress and increasing autophagy, or degradation of the dysfunctional cells. Separate investigations of CBD, primarily in animal models, have documented the cannabinoid to possess a variety of therapeutic qualities, including anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, anti-epileptic, anti-cancer, antipsychotic, and bone-stimulating properties. Human trials assessing the administration of CBD in healthy subjects reported the compound to be safe and well tolerated, which can't be said for basic pharmaceuticals. New York governor pledges to revive state's dormant medical cannabis program. Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo intends to revive a dormant state law that allows for cannabis to be dispensed by physicians in hospital settings. The New York governor formally announced his intentions during his State of the State address on Wednesday, that would be January 8th, 2014. Acknowledging research suggests that marijuana may help manage the pain of cancer and other serious illnesses. Under his announced plan, physicians at up to 20 hospitals throughout the state will be permitted to authorize qualifying patients to use cannabis therapeutically. Governor Cuomo said that he intends to implement the program via executive action rather than by an act of the legislature. In previous years, proposals to legalize the broader therapeutic use of the plant have passed the Senate Assembly, State Assembly, but have stalled in the Senate. Under a 1980 state law known as the Antonio G. Olivieri Controlled Substance Therapeutic Research Program, physicians possess the ability to prescribe cannabis to patients as an investigational new drug. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, dozens of states enacted similar laws which relied on federal officials to provide government-grown cannabis to state health departments. However, only in a limited number of states, California, Georgia, Michigan, New Mexico, New York, Tennessee, and Vermont, ever successfully implemented these specific types of federally coordinated therapeutic research programs, all of which were discontinued by the mid-1980s. More recent state efforts to resurrect similar programs have not been successful. In 2013, Maryland lawmakers enacted legislation to allow the substance to be dispensed at teaching hospitals. To date, however, no hospitals have volunteered to participate in the program, and two of the state's largest institutions, Johns Hopkins Hospital and the University of Maryland Medical System, have publicly said that they will not have any involvement in the proposed system. According to a 2012 statewide Siena College Research Institute poll, 82% of New Yorkers support the legalization of cannabis when authorized by a physician. Until this year, Governor Cuomo had previously been on record opposing the therapeutic use of marijuana regardless of the circumstances. But apparently he sees the political wind blowing there with 82%. Yeah. Study: alcohol, not cannabis, associated with intimate partner violence. Men's consumption of alcohol but not cannabis is associated with intimate partner violence, according to survey data published this month in the journal Addictive Behaviors. Investigators at the University of Tennessee and Florida State assessed whether alcohol intoxication and/or cannabis use by college-age men in a current dating relationship was associated with increased odds of physical, sexual, or psychological aggression towards their partner over a 90-day period. They reported on any alcohol use days, heavy alcohol use days, that is 5 or more standard drinks, and as the number of drinks increased on any given day, the odds of physical and sexual aggression perpetration increased. The odds of psychological aggression increased on heavy alcohol use days only. By contrast, the authors determined that marijuana use days did not increase the odds of any type of aggression. Authors concluded, our findings were consistent with theoretical models of alcohol use and intimate partner violence and previous research in that odds of psychological, physical, and sexual aggression were all increased subsequent to alcohol use, but not with cannabis. Something that, geez, a lot of folks already freaking know, I think, you know. In Colorado, retail marijuana sales now underway. Woo!
Let me give you some more freaking technical facts about Mark Rippon, man. As I pulled
Denver, Colorado.
Listen to it.
Dozens of state and locally licensed cannabis retailers opened for business on Wednesday, that would be January 1st, 2014, engaging in thousands of retail transactions with customers aged 21 and older. The sales are in compliance with newly enacted state regulations allowing for the commercial production and retail sale of cannabis to adults. In past weeks, state regulators have approved over 300 businesses to engage in marijuana commerce. Several dozens of those enterprises opened their doors on Wednesday, while dozens more are expected to begin operating within the coming weeks. NORML Executive Director Alan St. Pierre called the day's events historic. He said, for the first time in modern history, a state is regulating cannabis as a legal commodity in a manner similar to alcohol. Colorado is the first, but it certainly won't be the last, state to treat cannabis as a legal adult retail product rather than as a prohibited, criminalized substance. The genie is out of the bottle, and it's doubtful that it's going to go back in. Under Colorado law, adults may legally possess, and grow limited quantities of cannabis. Licensed commercial retailers may also cultivate, produce, and sell cannabis and cannabis-infused products. Local municipalities, in addition to state regulators, most signed off on the operation of marijuana businesses. 55% of state voters in November 2012 approved ballot language authorizing adults to possess, grow, and commercially sell cannabis. In August, Deputy Attorney General James Cole issued a 3-page memorandum affirming that the Justice Department would not interfere in states' efforts to regulate cannabis sales, but provided that those states' regulations limit the substance's availability to children and do not allow for the diversion of cannabis to states that have not legalized its use. In-state residents may purchase up to 1 ounce of cannabis. Out-of-state customers are limited to purchasing no more than 1/4 ounce of cannabis per retail transaction. Retail cannabis sales are subject to state sales tax in addition to a cannabis-specific 25% sin tax. Transactions involving the purchase of medicinal cannabis by state-qualified patients are not subject to similar taxation. Public consumption of cannabis is subject to a civil fine. Further details on existing Colorado laws and regulations specific to cannabis industry practices are available online from the Colorado Department of Revenue. Similar regulations governing state-licensed cannabis production and sales are anticipated to begin in Washington State in the coming months. Yes, sir. And I'm sure that a lot of folks in Oregon are just all agog, anticipating being able to run up to Washington State and get their cannabis.
TV show. I produce a lot.
A majority of medical cannabis consumers report using the plant as a substitute for prescription drugs, alcohol, or some other illicit substance. according to survey data published in the October issue of Addiction Research and Theory. This out of Victoria, Canada. An international team of investigators from Canada and the United States assessed the subjective impact of marijuana on the use of licit and illicit substances via self-report in a cohort of 404 medical cannabis patients recruited from 4 dispensaries in British Columbia, Canada. Researchers reported that subjects frequently substituted cannabis for other substances, including conventional pharmaceuticals, finding over 41% state that they used cannabis as a substitute for alcohol, 31% used cannabis as a substitute for illicit substances, and 67.8% used cannabis as a substitute for prescription drugs. 3 main reasons cited for cannabis-related substitution are less withdrawal at 67%, fewer side effects 60%, and better symptom management, suggesting that many patients may have already identified cannabis as an effective and potentially safer adjunct or alternative to their prescription drug regimen. Overall, 75% of the respondents said that they substitute cannabis for at least one other substance. Men were more likely than women to report substituting cannabis for alcohol or illicit drugs. Authors concluded that while some studies have found a small percentage of the general population that uses cannabis may develop a dependence on the substance, a growing body of research on cannabis-related substitution suggests that for many patients, cannabis is not only an effective medicine, but also a potential exit drug to the problematic substance use. Given the incredible biological, social, and psychological mechanisms behind these results, and the associated potential to decrease personal suffering, and the personal and social costs associated with addiction, further research appears to be justified on both economic and ethical grounds. Clinical trials with those who have had poor outcomes with conventional psychological or pharmacological addiction therapies could be a good starting point to further our understanding of cannabis-based substitution effect. Well, there you go. Helping you get off the bad stuff.
Yes,
Cannabis.
that's 1983.
Since we don't know how long. Probably ever since man first encountered it and started using it medically.
When that sealed out. Yeah, I'm reading this, bro. Yeah.
Well, that's the most of the news thing there. Do we have any questions or comments from the Peanut Gallery?
Gibbs was coach of the
Not at this time,
NFL.
but they probably used it as a rope first.
Well, the hemp benefits are something that, we should talk about, because we should get folks at the state level to continue to try and get hemp planted in Oregon. We should also try to get at the federal level hemp laws, a hemp bill. There's something in the Farm Bill going through the U.S. Congress currently regarding hemp. And so you need to contact your representatives out there, folks, and make sure that hemp happens. And this will be a big benefit to your region, your state, your country, and indeed the whole world. And the war in general. So, things like cannabis use unlikely to cause schizophrenia, another blow to reefer madness. Family genetics rather than adolescent cannabis use increases risk of schizophrenia, according to a case-controlled study published online in the journal Schizophrenia Research. Investigators from Harvard Medical School compared the family histories of 108 schizophrenia patients and 171 individuals without schizophrenia to assess whether youth cannabis consumption was an independent factor in developing the disorder. Researchers reported that a family history of schizophrenia increased the risk of developing the disease, regardless of whether or not subjects consumed cannabis as adolescents. There was an increased morbid risk for schizophrenia in relatives of the cannabis using and non-using patient samples compared with their respective non-psychotic controlled samples, authors reported. there was no significant difference in morbid risk for schizophrenia between relatives of the patients who use or do not use cannabis. They concluded, results of the current study, both when analyzed using morbid risk and family frequency calculations, suggest that having an increased familial risk for schizophrenia is the underlying basis for schizophrenia in these samples and not the cannabis use. While cannabis may have an effect on the age of onset of schizophrenia, it is unlikely to be the cause of the illness. Previous studies have reported that rates of schizophrenia have remained steady for decades despite changing patterns in cannabis use among the population. Commenting on the study's findings, NORML Deputy Director Paul Armentano said that concerns regarding cannabis's potential impact on psychiatric illnesses arguably warrant further study. However, such concerns, even if confirmed, are not persuasive justifications for continuing cannabis criminalization. Just the opposite is true. There are now numerous adverse health consequences associated with alcohol, tobacco, and the prescription drugs, all of which are far more dangerous and costlier to society than cannabis. It is precisely because of these consequences that these products are legally regulated and their consumption is restricted to specified consumers and settings. The same principle ought to apply to cannabis. Hear, hear. And if you agree, register, vote, and get everyone you know to do so also, to make sure we have the leadership in place. Then when we pass initiatives, when we put people in office on the promise of real change, that they actually do this and not the opposite. Also, another blow to reefer madness. Cannabidiol holds promise for treating psychosis. CBD, a non-psychotropic cannabinoid, alleviates psychotic symptoms and may hold promise as an alternative antipsychotic treatment, according to a review published in the November issue of the journal Neuropsychopharmacology. Investigators in the Netherlands and in the United Kingdom reviewed preclinical and clinical data on the use of CBD as an antipsychotic agent. Authors reported that both animal and human studies document the ability of CBD to mitigate symptoms of psychosis. Specifically, CBD administration is associated with improved symptoms in clinical evaluations of patients with schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, and ketamine-induced dissociative and psychotic symptoms. Investigators also highlighted a 2012 double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial assessing CBD versus the prescription antipsychotic drug amisulpride in 42 subjects with schizophrenia and acute paranoia. Authors reported that both CBD and the prescription drug were associated with equally significant clinical improvement in this patient population, but that cannabidiol possessed significantly less side effects. They concluded, evidence from several study domains suggests that CBD has some potential as an antipsychotic treatment. Given the high tolerability and superior cost effectiveness, CBD may prove to be an attractive alternative to current antipsychotic treatments. Previous human trials assessing the administration of CBD in healthy human subjects report that the cannabinoid is safe and well tolerated. Separate investigations of CBD, primarily in animal models, have documented the cannabinoid to possess a variety of therapeutic qualities, including anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, anti-epileptic, anti-cancer, and bone-stimulating properties. Recently, the FDA approved the experimental use of CBD extracts for the treatment of a rare form of intractable pediatric epilepsy known as Dravet syndrome. Preliminary clinical trials assessing the safety and tolerability of the compound in children are scheduled to begin immediately. Or is that imminently? Eminently, it is imminent. But hey, if folks want to keep up with the news and information, you really ought to come on down to the Mercy Center at some point. You can either come down here on Wednesday nights at our weekly meeting, which is at 1745 Capitol Street Northeast at 7 p.m. And here they come. They're coming to take us away. Oh, they passed us again. Anyway, so folks can also come down Monday through Friday, noon to 6, to the same address. Come and pick up your Oregon Cannabis Connection and find out all about resources like the Mercy Center and businesses, things that you need to get growing or to get insurance. Heck, there's Agent 420. Can be seen at agent420.biz and get more information on how you can get insurance for your grow or communal grow, or if you're a nonprofit center like us, simple basic insurance, liability, premises, all these other fun things that you need just to open up the doors. And with the upcoming medical marijuana facilities coming online in March. March 1st is when it's official. March 3rd is going to be the first official day for accepting applications. But you'll want to have your insurance lined up there, folks. So definitely check out agent420.biz. Again, though, also for your individual insurance needs, and not just for basic theft or accident to your garden, but crop insurance should you have some disaster strike you, and raid insurance if the cops raid you wrongly. If you're within the limits of the law, then you're going to get insurance company money then to help you through that difficult time. So check that out, folks. Agent420.biz. Teens alcohol tobacco use falls to historic lows. Annual survey finds. Uruguay, lawmakers authorize marijuana production and sales. Indiana, majority of adults support regulating cannabis like alcohol. Also California, majority of adults back marijuana legalization in 2013 field poll. No big deal there. They've been favoring it for a long time, but still can't seem to get her done. Study, prevalence of illicit drugs in fatal crashes is low compared to alcohol. Think Tank Issues, this is out of United Kingdom, Bristol. Think Tank Issues Guidebook on how to regulate cannabis. Cannabis policy should be built on evidence of what will minimize the potential harms and maximize the potential benefits associated with the use of the drug, according to a new book, How to Regulate Cannabis, a Practical Guide, published by the British think tank Transform. The 248-page book offers market alternatives to cannabis prohibition with the aim of improving public health, reducing drug-related crime, protecting human rights, and providing good value for money. The book addresses such issues as cannabis taxation, packaging, retail operations, price controls, and other aspects of regulatory policy. This book guides policymakers and reform advocates through the key practical challenges in developing and implementing effective systems of legal regulation. The authors state, this book arrives in a world where multiple jurisdictions are already debating, developing, or actually implementing models of legal cannabis regulation. An executive summary of the guidebook is available online at www.tdpf.org.uk. Transform is a charitable think tank that campaigns for the legal regulation of drugs in both the UK and internationally. Well, let's hope that the leaders of the UK and around the world take a gander at that book and seek to apply those things effectively as opposed to ignoring them as usual. What else? Register, vote, get everybody a note to do so also. Stay tuned for the next legislative session. Because if it holds true, I mean, the previous 2 legislative sessions, we've seen 30 plus bills, a majority of which were negative. We need to be on watch at least and try to prevent any bad stuff from slipping in this legislative session. Most folks think that it's a done deal. We're going to see legalization here in Oregon and indeed across America. It's just a matter of time, but it's in fact something that we need to continue to work to make happen, or it's not going to happen and the status quo is going to remain in place. Worse yet, we might get a bad law in that really won't do anything but place hold and keep real reform from happening. So folks need to stay in touch here at Mercy, and we'll keep you informed on the bills, good, bad,
And
ugly,
get
and
in
otherwise.
touch with your congressman and senator. Those are the important people.
Yes, it's particularly important to contact all officials from dog catcher on up, because in 2014 you're going to have a chance to replace these representatives. For example, my representative is Julie Parrish. When time came for her to vote on the PTSD bill, she said no. She said no medical marijuana for PTSD, for veterans and others who could use it. So that person has to go. She certainly doesn't represent me or the real veterans who could use it. So folks need to contact your representative, find out how they're going to vote on the bills that are going to be coming up here, or how they did vote, and you vote accordingly. And spread the word. Make sure that you get everybody you know voting properly, voting smart also. And we'll spread the word. Also coming down the pike, this session will be on the ballot in 2014. Hopefully some bills, some petitions to legalize cannabis in Oregon. Also, we may see a referendum or referendum to put forth some form of legalization. But in the meantime, we'll have medical marijuana facilities coming online in Oregon, as well as PTSD has been added to the list of qualifying conditions. So if you want to get medical cannabis for your PTSD, either get your primary care physician to sign for you, or get your records together and bring them on down to the Mercy Center at 1745 Capitol Street Northeast here in Salem, Oregon, and we will vet them and send them on to the appropriate doctor. We have one here in Salem, or we'll get you to the nearest clinic if that doesn't work for you, or hopefully get your doc to sign for you. If your records aren't suitable, we'll let you know what it's necessary to get them up to snuff and official and all that neat stuff. The main thing is to help you get your card. In the meantime, while we change the law, I mean, folks shouldn't have to get a freaking card to use cannabis for medicine. But that's a rant for another session. We're going to be signing off now here. Toodles, folks. Thanks all for showing up. Special thanks out there to the folks in Video Land tuning in. Spread the word. We want to see you and somebody else here back next time. Also, Toodle Channel 23, thanks to CCTV, producer PK, for helping us make happen. See you next time on Mercy TV.
Thank you. Have a good night, folks. You want to say anything before I turn it off, Glenn?
Yes, good night.
Good night. God bless you all, every single one of you.